Beautiful wedding yesterday. Sarah and Dustin got married yesterday afternoon, and some of our folks who are not here this morning are recovering from that. Bill and Jennifer and Sally and I left early enough that we don't have to recover. We're fine, but the rest of them. And then we've got people traveling and all these other things. But you know what? The people who are here are the people who are here, and man, the Holy Spirit's here, and so it's a full house. We do, I want to say hi to Laura. She came all the way from Anchorage, Alaska, just to be with you. Actually, she walked from next door, but she and her husband are church planners in Anchorage, Alaska, and we're glad to have them here. And then David, Robert, Robert. There's Dave over there. Robert, thank you, Robert. We're glad you're here. And somehow he knows Peter because they stood there and talked for a while. So I put two and two together, came up with 5, and Robert. So we're glad you're here. We're working our way through the book of Galatians, and one of the things I wanted to share with you that I think is so powerful on so many levels, and it's kind of ministering to me. But Malachi, how many of y'all know Malachi? Malachi Lowe, soon to be, I guess, I don't know, Brenner, but he may as well be. And Malachi is just an awesome kid. If you don't know Malachi, how old is Malachi? Sally? He's 6. And Malachi looked at his grandmother Yoli. I don't know what he calls her. Yaya. I think Yaya. Is that right? He said, Yaya, where does Pastor Mike go to church? And she said, What do you mean? Where does Pastor Mike go to church? He said, I just want to know, where does Pastor Mike go to church? And she said, well, Malachi, he goes to Gateway just like you do. And he said, but he never sits down. So I think that's very, very applicable to those of us who are in the ministry or in a position of leadership or something like that. Sometimes we don't sit down and we don't get fed, and we have to make sure that we are being fed somewhere along the way. And so I just thought that was a very cool thing. I also want to just say that Sally will attest to this. She and I, we wake up very differently. She wakes up, she wants to be quiet, she wants her coffee. You know, I'm wake up, turn everything on, go get something to eat, start talking. And I wake up hungry every day. I always wake up hungry. I wake up hungry every day. Have I said that? So, and the thing I've realized is that just because I wake up hungry doesn't mean that I wake up thinking about what would be the best thing to feed this hunger. Oh, there's a donut. That would meet my hunger need. Oh, there's a Pop-Tart. Rarely do I look for something healthy, John, to start my day off. There's some kale. Let's eat that, or whatever that stuff is. And we're that way spiritually, too. I'm that way spiritually. I'm hungry, but I don't always feed it with the right thing. And this morning, this time that we had, I hope that it continues on for you and in your personal life. So we're in the book of Galatians. We are assuming that Galatians is one of the first books that Paul writes, but we do know that it's written much later than the book of Acts, and the book of Acts covers about 30 years of church history. And so the things that he's talking about in Galatians and how they intertwine with what's going on in Acts. And we'll spend a little bit more time in Acts. But basically, Paul has come to the churches of Galatia, and we don't know if that's just a people group or if it's a political group, but either way, and it applies to us today. And he basically is saying, I got some good news and I got some bad news. The bad news is all this extra stuff y'all are doing, being the one who founded the church, having your granddad be the one who built the church, being the one who gives all the money and does a mission trip every summer and lives right and does this and does that, that doesn't do you any good. If living by the law did you any good, I'd be the best one here. Now the good news, Jesus Christ did it all. He finished the work. You don't need to try to add something to it. As a matter of fact, when you try to add something to it, you actually take away from the work of the cross. If you and I still have to do something, then the work of the cross wasn't enough. And Paul is appalled by that whole notion, because here was a guy who had set his heart to destroy this group of people who followed this man named Jesus, until he had an experience with this man named Jesus, and then all of his head knowledge was flipped on, and he was like, pow, he is the Messiah. I was hunting all these people down because I was afraid he was distracting them from the real Messiah. He is the real Messiah. His head knowledge got connected with an experience, a transforming experience, and he was like, okay, boom. So he had this passion. He wanted to let people know, quit trying to add something to the gospel. You can't improve on the gospel. All you can do is make a contrary gospel. And I think he's going to show us in the scriptures that we're going to share today, two contrary gospels. One of them is an anti-Christ gospel, and that is that Christ isn't the way, that there is another way. And then the Christ and gospel. Well, it's Christ and keeping this. It's Christ and doing this. It's Christ and being this. It's Christ. It's not Christ in anything. It's Christ alone. And you got to have Christ in the equation, and he's the only one who's going to be over on that side of the equal sign, okay? So here we are. We're going to be in Galatians chapter 1. We're going to really focus today on verses 11 through 24. And Paul says this thing. I've had a change of heart, guys. Listen, it's not law, it's grace. It's not works, it's faith. It's not Moses, it's Jesus. It's not Mount Sinai, it's Mount Golgotha. It's not earned, it's received. It's not trying, it's trusting. It's not religion, it's relationship. It's not do, it's done. Now that's not original. I copied that down word for word because when I heard that, I thought, I want to say this from the pulpit, and then I will give somebody credit for it. So we're going to start in verse 11 today. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. Now, he's dealing with something that is particularly important here for him to point that out, because these other people, this addition to the gospel was coming from people, was coming from men. Now, yeah, there is the Ten Commandments, but then what did the high priest and the religious officials do with that Ten Commandments and what Moses heard in the wilderness? Well, they had pumped that up about 20 times what was actually there, and they had made several hundred things that you could do and several hundred things that you couldn't do, and they had adjusted. It's like, well, you know what, we need to adjust because you and I think times have changed, but the people in Jesus' day, they thought things had really changed since the days of walking around in Israel, Israel walking around through the Promised Land. I mean, everything changes, and I saw a television show the other day, and the power was out in the house, and all the kids were panicking because they hadn't been able to charge their cell phones and their iPads, and they were all dead. And the kids were like, what do we do if there's an emergency? And the mom goes, well, you could just use the phone that's hanging on the wall. And they all looked and they said, when did we get that? It's like, it's been there for, since we moved in the house. By the way, we don't even have a house phone anymore. Most of us don't. So things had changed, and he wanted to make sure that they knew, look, what I'm about to tell you is not another one of man's things. I didn't hear this from anybody. I got this straight revelation from Jesus Christ. I was walking, I was going to persecute these people called the Christians, and all of a sudden I was blinded by a light that knocked me to my feet, and I heard a voice, why are you persecuting me? And I said, who is this? And the voice said, it's Jesus. And he had an experience with Jesus, and he said, okay, Lord, And that took him. And the revelation that he got was, again, remember, he was a Bible scholar. He knew the Old Testament and the law. As a matter of fact, I think it's Gamaliel was one of the leading teachers. And he wrote in some of his writings that Paul was his star student. I can't keep the guy in books. The guy is driving me nuts. He reads everything I give him, and he comes back and he gives me these awesome reports, and he's just way up here. And God took all of that stuff he had, and he added color. He turned on the switch. It went from just stuff he knew to stuff he had experienced. So Paul is saying, just so you know, this isn't another, I sat down with a group of people and we came up with this great idea. This is revelation. What would the gospel look like that you came up with? Okay, y'all just make up a gospel real quick. Somebody just think about, okay, the gospel according to Mike would be horrible. It would be horrible. And here's the problem. We'd either want to constantly be adjusting our gospel. Well, okay, I didn't think about that, so I'm going to have to adjust this. Well, I didn't think about that, so I'm going to have to adjust this. Oh, man, I didn't really think about any of that, so I'm going to just really have to take this whole section out of my gospel and put this whole... Or we would be like, some of us would be, I realize now that doesn't work, but I can't change it because it's already, I've already printed the pamphlets, so I can't change the gospel according to me. Man's gospel would not be a perfect gospel. Anytime we get involved in adding, subtracting, adjusting, improving, we're not doing God any favor. He said, look. There's a gospel. Anything other than this gospel that comes straight from God is a contrary gospel. Well, no, because our gospel's got Jesus in it. Okay, what else does it have in it? Well, it also has that you have to knock on so many doors in your lifetime. It also has that you have to maintain this, or you can't do this, or you have to do this, or you can't do this. See, that's not the gospel. The gospel is Jesus alone. Take anything out, it's no longer the gospel. Add anything to it, it's no longer the gospel. And we know this. But doesn't it subtly creep in? For those of us who were raised in a very traditional church, it's Jesus and not doing this. It's Jesus and always doing this. It's Jesus and always being here. It's Jesus and never being here. No, it's Jesus, period. Like Victor Borge. However he would do that. If you don't know who Victor Borge is, you're too young. You need to go Google him. He is on the internet. All right. Informational highway. Verse 12. This is one thing I wanted to say. How many of y'all were born sometime late 50s, early 60s? Okay, thank you. You remember that thing called the food pyramid? Did you know that most of the stuff on the food pyramid is now illegal, I think? Eggs. You got to eat so many eggs a day. No, eggs will give you high cholesterol. No, eggs won't give you high cholesterol. Eggs are good. Eggs are not good. Eggs are our friend. Eggs are our enemy. Cheese, bread, milk. You're supposed to eat these. No, you're not supposed to eat these. You should never touch these. You should never keep them away. See, that's what happens when man gets in there and says, I'm going to come up with the perfect gospel. We're not that smart. Something will happen. So I wanted to get that in there about the food pyramid, because of course my food pyramid it's chocolate. Yeah, it's the three basic food groups: sugar in, sugar on, sugar around. So verses 12 and 13. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. For you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. Paul is introducing the concept of divine revelation. He's also giving us a glimpse of another form of contrary gospel. Two main forms of contrary gospel: the Antichrist gospel, where we delete Jesus, and the Christ and gospel, where we add something to Jesus. So Paul's getting ready to kind of talk about that under the concept of divine revelation. When we look at Paul's conversion and ministry, we see him almost immediately beginning to preach. So he didn't have to go away and get trained.